Hello, guys and girls. Today we're going to be talking about Dehancer Mobile. It's for iOS. You can get it on your phone or on iPad. You can also now get it on the Mac Store, and it uses the same sort of version as the iPad, which is pretty cool. So today we're going to edit a couple of photos, and I'm just going to guide you through the sort of tools that it gives you. If you use Dehancer Pro on like DaVinci Resolve or on Photoshop, very similar, almost exact same results. Okay, so let's get started on our first photo. This is just a basic forest scene photo that I took a while ago. I believe this was with my iPhone, but I'm not 100% sure. But I'm just going to run you through the overall UI. So you import your photo. It gives you a list of presets. You can have your own presets that you make or the ones that are already built in. These are just a couple of the built-in ones that I've favorited just to guide you through and show you the type of things it can do. But then you can go in depth and you click on edit. And then at the bottom here, you've got all of the individual things that it does to the image. So starting with the crop, you can pick the source of the image. So if you were using video, you could pick the specific log profile of the camera that was used. You've got the film simulations, the developing module, highlight compression, expand, so you can get your contrast in the image. The print emulation, which is pretty cool. Color head, that's just for adjust. You can individually adjust the highlights, the midtones, and the shadows. Film grain, which is also very interesting. It doesn't just add grain, it generates the grain and it also slightly softens the image in a way that looks really natural, which is great. Then you've got halation and bloom. So for like the highlight areas where the sun would be coming through, I can show you that the halation can make it bloom a little bit more. Very filmic. You get that orangey sort of glow. You can add a vignette. You've also got film damage and overscan, so you can make it look. I'll give you that little quick look. There you go. You make it look like it's actually film stock. So overall, pretty cool. A lot of tools you can go through, infinite combinations. Let's just see what we can do with this photo. I'm going to show you a couple of the presets that I really like the start of. So this is the original photo, just as is. You can double tap and it zooms into 100%. You can zoom out. So this was just the image as it was taken, no alterations yet. Go for Agfa color 100. Boom, immediately gives it that actual vibe of the film emulation. You can see that the greens have gone a bit more yellowy, orangey. I quite like that. It takes down the actual exposure a little bit as well. Makes it look more natural. So this is very slightly overexposed. Let's have a look at Chrome RSX2. Oh, that's also pretty cool. That one's very contrasty. I like this one. This one's a bit flatter. The Chrome RSX one has a bit more contrast and depth to it. Let's have a look at this one, the Gorsky 1906. I quite like this one as well. This gets rid of the warm tones, and it's got slightly more of a blue tint to the greens, which I like, but it hasn't affected the overall exposure too much. If I press and hold, you can see the original. That's the original. That's the edit. So it's adding quite a lot of contrast and it's changing those green tones very well. I quite like that. It has a sort of matted look to it. Would just need probably the exposure coming down a little bit. But let's just start fresh, start brand new. This is the original, and we'll go through one by one and see what we can do. All right, so we'll start with the film. This was the one that I just liked a minute ago, actually, the Gorsky 1906. You can adjust the push and pull of the film stock, and depending on the stock, it'll have different effects. So if we try the CN200, as you can see, as I'm changing it, it's adjusting the warmth and probably there's some other stuff that I can't see. I think it looks like it's bringing down highlights a bit. But yeah, the push and pull do different things depending on the stock. But let's go with the Gorsky because I do like that. I can see this one's editing. It's changing the highlights very slightly. Let me find a point that I like. I quite like it about there. Very tiny amount. Looks a little bit more, a little warmer. But yeah, you've got a lot of film stocks you can go through. Another one that I like, Astrum color negatives, usually pretty good as well. It's a bit flatter, but it's got that film vibe. So if you've got a scene where you don't need as much saturation, this is quite a nice one for it. You see it just brings back those greens, changes them slightly yellow, but it has some cool look to it. I like that. You got Cinestill 50D, Cinestill 800T. Ooh, maybe Eterna would look quite nice on this. Fuji Eterna, Vivid 500. I quite like that too. I like the slight yellow and orangey hues coming into the green. Might go with something like that. There's so much to choose from. Provia is always good. What else? Velvia is pretty nice on forest scenes. It really brings out the greens though. Bit too much in this scene for me. What else do we have? Chrome RSX is great. Agricolor 100. I do quite like this one. I don't know, it just has a vibe to it. Let's try this one. See if we can push and pull a little bit. Ah, there we go. We can bring back a little bit of the greens. Maybe about there. All right. So that's the film set. Chosen our film. I'll push pull. Let's go to developer. I don't really do a lot on here. You can use it for, like, you can contrast boost, but I do this a little bit later on. You can flatten it out or you can increase, but it will crush it a little bit too much. Be very careful on this. Gamma correction, don't really need unless you're using it for video. Color boost just seems to boost all of the saturation, but it doesn't do it too much. I don't know what it does. It's different to the just bringing up saturation. You can tell it doesn't go crazy, but it does bring some of that color back in from the original. I'm going to bring it about 20. Let's have a little look where we are. That's the start. That's where we are now. Okay. Compression. I don't know if we need it on this image. You can tell here, if I go into the highlights, compression just reins in those highlights around the edge a bit. If you can see around those leaves, compression just brings it in. But that does bring in, if you've got aberrations around the edge, it does bring in the color from the aberrations. So you've got to be careful. And it can make it look a little bit fake if it's a bit too harsh. I'm going to leave this off because I don't mind some of that. Or I'll leave it on and I'll turn it down, because we don't want it that much. But you can see in the road at the bottom, the dirt, it actually brings out those highlights, makes it a bit more saturated. So maybe about 30%, and do on and off. Yeah, just a little bit takes that off. Expand. I don't think we're going to need too much here, but you can adjust your white point and black point. So when you adjust your white point and black point, it can make it brighter, or it can make it, you can underexpose it a little bit this way. I feel like the white point needs to come up a slight bit as we use compression. So maybe I'll have it at 98. And the black point is actually not too bad where it is, but if I want a little bit more contrast, I could knock it down. Let's go a couple of points down. Okay, for the print, generally, normal would be just linear. That'd be as you bring it in, that would be it. But you've got glossy paper. This is great for photos. This would be like as if you're printing it out on just a standard photo. You see, you get a bit more of that. You get a little bit more contrast in it, and the colors seem to go a little bit deeper. So as this is a photo, we'll use that. Exposure, I feel, could come down a slight bit, maybe. Just a third of a stop. Maybe even a little bit less than that. Let me see. You just got to do this all by eye. Whatever looks good for you on your screen should hopefully match what others will see as well. But not everyone's going to have the same display as you, so you've got to be wary of that. Tonal contrast is actually not too bad in this scene. If you crank it up, you can really see it crushes those blacks, and the point between the highest and the lowest gets a bit more separated. Also, if you do it the other way, you'll get the extreme as well. But for this, I think I'm just going to knock it up a very slight amount, a couple of points. Color density is great. This is where you can really get that film vibe. If you knock it down, you'll see that it strips slightly the saturation, but not as if you were just pulling the saturation down with a slider. It's just knocking the vibrancy of that color out. But if you bring it up, you get some really like rich colors, especially on reds. You'll notice this a lot. Reds and blues, you'll see the blue and the reds actually get darker and look more filmic. I hate saying the word filmic, but sadly that's what it does. Go to like 40. I feel like 40 is pretty good. So that's where we started. Looking very digitally, I have to say now that you look back on it. And then we're to here. I mean, I'm liking the look of that. You've also got this analog range limiter. This limits the values to simulate more as if it was actually printed. So you'll notice the shadows will come up very slightly, and usually the highlights will come down very slightly. I'm going to put that on. And then what I'm going to do to counteract that is knock a little bit of the tonal contrast up to balance. But I think that looks pretty good. Okay, I'm thinking maybe we just exposure a little bit, very slightly brighter to minus 0.2 maybe. Around there. There we go. Okay, it's looking good. Color head, I don't really want to do much on here, if anything at all, but you can adjust the yellow blue shift so you can make it look a bit warmer. Actually, hold on a minute. I do, because the scene is slightly bluish because of how overcast it was. I do quite like bringing the warmth up a bit. Not too much, maybe just like 10. Just to get that warmth back in the scene. Okay. You can adjust your magenta green. I don't really want to mess with this. We've got a lot of green in the scene already. And also your cyan red. So if you want it to be a bit cooler, or if you want it to be a bit warmer, more towards red, you can do that. You can also adjust shadow tone. These here will make it cooler or warmer. And it will do it only to the shadows, only to the midtones, or only to the highlights. So you can also adjust those. I feel like I quite like the bluish highlights with the rest being warmer. If you look at the sky up here, if I take that out, you see they're starting to go a bit orange. I don't necessarily like that. I sort of like that color contrast, but not too heavy. Maybe minus 40 just to bring the blues back. Then that contrasts quite nice with the warmth around the trees. And this one is very important to me. Film grain. I will show you this. You're going to have to zoom in for this to really get the best idea of it. Okay. Let me find a spot where you'll be able to see it nicely. Maybe towards this tree. All right, so you can see relatively sharp, but very digital because it is, it's just the phone and the processing. But as soon as we knock on film grain, can you see that? Just adds a very, very slight blur to it. But it's also added in grain, which makes sure that it keeps the detail. You can especially see it if you look up here towards these leaves, and then I turn it on and off. You look at the middle leaf. Can you see that? Goes very sharp and defined. So then it's got like a more pleasing roll off where the softness comes in. So I quite like that. So I think I'm going to keep it where it is. There's a lot of profiles you can choose from 8mm stock, 16, 35, 65. But you can also make it custom. And then here you can choose the type, positive, negative, the amount, the size, the resolution. Resolution is very important. If I zoom in again, this stock is currently 75. I believe that's a percentage because it goes up to 100 and 0. But that will dictate how sharp the image remains with the grain on top. So if I bring it up to 100, you can see it's starting to look a bit digital again. If I take it down to 0, very blurry. But if you move it somewhere in between, I tried to keep it more towards 70 to 80. Then you keep the detail, most of the detail, but you've got that, it's the slight softness and smoothness that makes it look more analog, which I like. So I'm going to keep it around there. I think that's quite nice. So grain is a big one. You especially see it in the highlights here as well. Let me turn it on and off. You see before, as you can see, it's starting to look digital again there. With it on, the grain just adds something to it. I don't know what it is, but your eyes just like that type of grain where it's just soft. It's got the sharpness, but it's got the blur, the very slight amount of blur that just makes things have a roll off that looks lovely. While we're here, actually, we can go to halation. All right, very extreme case. This is the standard halation profile that will come on. As you can see, very extreme in this case because it is quite a bright scene. But what halation is, if I turn it off, as you can see up here, the values are quite bright. What halation does shows you how film would react, where if there's something light against something darker, you'll typically get a halation effect, which is like this. I would tone it down a bit though, maybe have it more like this. As you can see, it's got that like the warm roll off from where the bright area leaks into the darker areas. And I quite like that actually. If I turn it off, it looks nice. But if you have halation on, it just adds the aesthetic of the more filmic vibe. So I quite like it like that, but I would never have it. I would never have it like where that is. That's crazy. But maybe like 5 to 10. Yeah, it's quite nice. I'll leave it like 5. It's just got, there you go. It just adds something. And your eye likes that when it picks out a little detail like that, even when it's zoomed out here. Like you can tell, if you look at the top, it just brings a little warmth around the edges of those dark sides. And you've also, again, you've got a lot of different types. And you can also customize it. There you go. Hold on, let me zoom out. There we go. Zoom back in. So you can amplify it. You can adjust where the source comes in. So that will choose where it starts. So along the highlights, you can adjust how much of the highlight will bring the halation. You can smooth it out. You can choose how far spread it goes. If there's a global amount that applies across the whole picture, as if it was a really like sunny day and you'd get a very slight amount of halation everywhere. You can adjust the hue of it, the blue compensation, and the impact on the whole image. So if I knock down impact, you'll see it starts to go away. But I'll leave it around 65. I think it's quite nice. Just so I get that very slight sunny vibe across the leaves. But yeah, so halation is good. Bloom is also great. Let me zoom out again. If I turn bloom off, you can see that was a standard image. Bloom on, you're starting to get everything getting that ethereal slight glow across the whole image. But it comes in through the highlights. So if I go down here, turn off bloom, you can see the value from the highlight to into the leaves sort of blends slightly. There's not quite a harsh edge. The values brighten in an area. And I quite like that. Especially on these images where there's a lot of white space. Then you got a vignette. Oh, everyone knows what a vignette is. You can control how much dark. If it's a bright vignette, I'll go extreme, go 2 just to show you. You can bring down the size. So the larger the size, the less of the image is going to affect because it's like expanding the circle towards the edge. Then you can feather it. If I have 0 feathering and I bring in the size, you'll be able to see what I mean. That is essentially what a vignette is. And exposure will let you adjust what type of vignette it is. Typically it's a dark vignette, but you can get brighter ones where things are overexposed or the film messes up. But typically it'll be like something like that. But then you've got the feather. The feather just makes that circle expand slowly out so it looks more natural. And then I can bring the size out. And it just brings a dynamic effect to the image. So for me personally, I'll probably just have a little slight, maybe 70 feather. And then I'd bring it in slightly. Just around the edges or a little bit darker than the center. Just it brings that focus back into where the light is down the middle. Maybe even a little bit further out. There we go. Again, it's all about making those tiny little adjustments just by your eye, what you like. Onto film damage. Personally, I don't really use this. But as you can see, you can adjust the amount of film damage there is. You can refresh it to get a new seed and it'll change. It'll randomly generate where it's going to be. You can choose the type. There's different profiles. So if I zoom out and adjust that there's going to be a lot, then you'll start seeing that there's more like scratches, hair fibers, stuff like that across the image, emulating as if it was printed and you perhaps scanned it in. But I don't personally use that. Again, overscan, you can make it look as if it's an actual physical product and you've scanned it in. There's a lot of different types on this one. This might work better on video also, but for photos, I don't personally use it. A lot of options you can use. Great stuff though. But yeah, as you can see, considering how easy that was to do and just mess around with, we made a lot of changes. We've made a lot of changes and they've all been very, very easy. So if you're doing any type of photo work or video work, say if you're just filming on your iPhone, use the Enhancer Mobile. It's great. Very easy to use. Very powerful. Infinite like customizability. Loads of choices you can make. Mix and match everything. It's compatible with iPhone and iPad. And it's just not an ordinary... There's a lot of filter apps out there. We know this. iPhone's had them forever. This is not just applying a filter. This is not just adjusting a filter. This is using like real research and real science and technology behind it. And it's exactly the same as like pretty much their desktop versions. I use it on Resolve. I use it on Photoshop and Lightroom. Very powerful. Very easy to use. Gives you something that just not a lot of other places are giving you for an affordable price. So go give it a try. I'll leave a link down below. I'll leave the name. But yeah, the Enhancer Mobile is a win for me. I love using it. Whenever I'm taking photos on my phone, that's what I'm using to edit them. Just gives it that look that I like. And you can just, you can play with it forever. It's fun. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Go give it a try.